Hey guys, what's going on? Here it's me, Jay, here to start another new series. We have a bunch of series on this channel: Decade in Review, Year in Review, Wrestling, WrestleMania reviews. But this is another new one, and this is a review of every single Star Wars film and piece of physical media. So again, that doesn't include games, that doesn't include books, that doesn't include any of the expanded universe. Only the physical media, which means the 9 movies and the various shows. So this is the new series, and it will cover the entire Star Wars universe as it pertains to physical media, not uh, books and comics or anything like that. So let's get started. First of all, what is Star Wars? And this is the first one, the initial one. I'm going in chronological order, in order of which they were released, not in order of which they are in the story. What is it? How did it begin? What are the origins of it? Well, it comes from the mind of one George Lucas. Who is George Lucas? A man, a movie director, a film director born in Modesto, California, a small town in Northern California, to a store shop owner, his father, George Lucas Sr. And initially, Lucas Sr. wanted his son to be involved with that store business. But George had other plans. Always a fan of comic books, always a fan of movies. He wanted to get into the film industry. So what did he do? He went to USC for college, and he became a film director. Now, not at first. Um, George Lucas's initial love was cars, and he enjoyed drag racing, car racing. But around the time when he was a teenager, he got into a car accident. When he got into this car accident, he nearly died. So upon this life-changing experience, he decided, you know what, I'm going to take up my other passion, and that is film. And of course, his father didn't believe in him, but George said, watch me, and I'll be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. So how was he going to get there? Now, being that he was in film school, he had to do a film project. He had to create a movie, and that's exactly what he did. In 1971, he released THX 1138, a science fiction movie about a dystopian future, about a totalitarian world, similar to like 1984 and movies of that nature. And this was very timely because this was the early 70s. We just come from the tumultuous 60s where um, students on college campuses were fighting against the man. They were fighting against the system, both in the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement. So now we're in the 70s. And in 1971, the massacre at Kent State had just happened, in which student protesters, they were protesting against the Vietnam War and the escalation thereof, were murdered and massacred right there on college campuses. So, of course, this is a timely topic. But what else is happening? Movies are changing. In the 1950s, when television came out, and increasingly in the 60s, movies found it hard to compete because now people didn't have to go to movies necessarily in order to be entertained. They could just sit at home and be entertained with television shows. And television shows, such as those written by Norman Lear, they were becoming more and more serious. They were tackling more and more social issues, and movies just couldn't compete. You know what I mean? They fell behind. Box office receipts fell behind for movies, and it was the studio system. The studios were more important at that time than the artists because this is how Hollywood was initially formed in the late 20s and early 30s, where the studio controlled basically everything, and the director and the artist controlled nothing. But these younger directors, and Lucas was among them, you had George Lucas, you had Steven Spielberg, you had Lucas's mentor, Francis Ford Coppola, you had uh, Brian De Palma. They were like the four horsemen of movie making. They were determined to create their visions and put their visions into practice and do the work that they wanted, create the vision that they wanted. They were really ambitious. Steven Spielberg was the first one to break out of the pack with Jaws, and then Francis Ford Coppola comes through with with The Godfather. And these movies in the early 1970s were changing the way that movies were made. Blockbusters, you know, must see things, things that were heavily on the special effects, things that television just could not compete with because television did not have the budget. So you want the movie industry to stay alive, you have to compete on a different sort of level uh, than TV. You have to be more competitive. You have to be more innovative. And the way they were going to be innovative was with special effects. Jaws was heavily special effects. The Exorcist was heavily special effects. The Godfather was not heavily special effects, but the ambition of The Godfather in adapting Mario Puzo's novel to the big screen was ambitious. So uh, that was Lucas's ambition as well. So THX 1138 is not a success, but he and Francis Ford Coppola they have formed this filmmakers commune called American Zoetrope, and they were determined to make this possible. So he figured he'd go down the more mainstream route and create like a nostalgic film. It was, and he did this in 1973. Now keep in mind, and it was called American Graffiti, and he was basically not forced to do this, but he was kind of kind of forced, like kind of they prodded him the studio 20 um Universal's United Artists, the studio that was behind it. And it was an attempt to look back at the world before the Vietnam War, before like America had gone topsy turvy. So it featured a lot of like late 50s, early 60s type music. And it was a nostalgic look at teenage life from there in terms of racing and the car culture that was having California, something that Lucas himself, when he was a teenager, was a part of. And it featured like his favorite rock and roll songs. And um, it had Ron Howard in it, and it had Harrison Ford. Eventually they would spin it off into a TV series, and ABC would pick it up, and that would become the genesis for Happy Days. A nostalgic look back when times were a little bit simpler in the late 50s and early 60s before everything went crazy. And that was a huge success. So with that being a huge success, Lucas now, 73, Lucas wanted to his own vision. He wanted to release Flash Gordon because he was a huge fan of Flash Gordon as a kid. It was a Flash Gordon was a movie serial. Now, not the cereal that you eat, but a serial in the movie sense was an episodic, uh, an episodic movie. Like back in the day, back in the 30s and 40s, when you would go to the movies, you just wouldn't you would go see that feature film, but you would go see other things too, like shorts, uh, and people would see these shorts, and they would have sometimes shows, sometimes musical performances, what have you. It was an experience that people went to. It wasn't just a movie. And Flash Gordon was one of them, starring Buster Crabbe, and they were usually done in parts of 12, like 12 increments of it. And Lucas wanted to bring this to up to the modern era, but just when he was about to acquire the rights, someone else bought the rights to Flash Gordon. So he decided, you know what? I'm going to create my own from scratch. So he didn't really have necessarily an idea to do it, but he knew he wanted to create a space opera. He wanted to create something that would tap into the innocence of the world because a lot of the movies, starting from 1969 to with Easy Rider, going into like The early 70s were a very pessimistic, a very dark period. You had Serpico, you had Dog Day Afternoon, these types of films. They weren't as optimistic, so he wanted to create something that was really optimistic and really Manichaean, really displaying the battle between good and evil. And he believed that evil was on the horizon because what was happening in the world in 1973 as he sat down to pen his space opera was Richard Nixon was the president of the United States, and initially in the 1972 election, Richard Nixon won against George McGovern by a landslide, right? But then you saw a lot of corruption, the corruption of Watergate, and a lot of the visceral reaction to Watergate. And Nixon had gone back on his promise to pull us out of war in Southeast Asia, and people were reacting to that. So Nixon was sort of like a dictator, and a lot of the liberals, which George Lucas was a liberal, saw him as a Hitlerian type figure in a similar way that the modern era would see Donald Trump, and they saw a dictatorship on the horizon in America. So Lucas wanted to use the film as a metaphor for that, for Nixon. So the emperor becomes a stand-in for Richard Richard Nixon in the early 70s when Lucas sets down to write it. But Lucas was never really a good writer. You know, he had help when it came to American Graffiti and writing the story and fleshing it out. But this was much more of an ambitious project. He had the genesis of what he wanted to do, but he did not have the specifics. So where does he get the specifics from? He gets it from Akira Kurosawa's. Hey, Damien. He gets it from Akira Kurosawa's film, The Hidden Fortress, a landmark Japanese film. Akira Kurosawa, famous Japanese director. Lucas studied him, and basically the skeleton of the original Star Wars: A New Hope is basically this movie. It's about two Sam. Sam. My weekend's going good, Damien. Thank you. Two samurai looking to rescue this princess from uh, an evil emperor. Basically, the exact same story. So Lucas sets out to write it, and he basically copies beat for beat each and every story beat of the Hidden Fortress, and he goes through many changes. He goes through like 4 or 5 treatments. Um, then he arrives at the story, and the story is basically Luke Skywalker, a young man from Tatooine, which is a remote planet out there in the galaxy, goes on a rescue mission with an older mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, a war veteran, and to save a princess who is trapped in not a hidden fortress, but in a starfleet, an Imperial starfleet called the Death Star, a planet-destroying missile. And that is the story of Star Wars: A New Hope. We start off with, yeah, me too. We start off with Luke Skywalker, who is, me too, Damien. We start off with Luke Skywalker, like I said, who is an orphan boy from Tatooine. Now, the name was the original name that Lucas had come up with in the original treatment after Journal of the Wills. Journal of the Wills was his original story, but it was so complicated and so convoluted that Lucas just threw it out. He comes up with Luke Starkiller, but because of Charles Manson, the Manson murders that happened in 1969, he changes that around, and he calls him Luke Skywalker. So basically, Luke Skywalker, born as an orphan, raised by his uncle Owen and his aunt Beru, on Tatooine. His uncle's a moisture former. Now, he's just a regular kid, basically, but he doesn't know what's going on around him. Now, the opening shot of Star Wars: A New Hope is is the Imperial fleet uh, chasing the rebels. Who are the rebels? Basically, we're introduced to a world ruled under a dictatorship, the Empire, the Galactic Empire, and it's never explained how the Galactic Empire came to be, how it came to exist. We just start in the middle of the story with this with this Imperial Star Fleet chasing this rebel ship, and we're introduced to the magnitude of the Imperial ship versus the minuscule nature of the rebel ship. So the rebels are outnumbered. They're just a ragtag bunch. They're people among the various planets within the galaxy. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that match too, Damien. Within the galaxy that are in disagreement with uh, the government, but and they're rebelling. And then we're introduced to a shootout between the stormtroopers, which are uh, the Imperial soldiers, and the rebels, and then Darth Vader. Darth Vader comes on the scene, this monster of a man, in this samurai outfit and his black cloak, and he, he's yelling at his commanders, find the stolen data tapes because apparently the rebels have stolen some of the plans for the Death Star because they're looking for a weakness within this planet destroying machine. And in his capture is Princess Leia, played by Carrie Fisher, and she's the princess of Alderaan. What is Alderaan? Alderaan is one of the planets that is in rebellion. Her father, Bail Organa, led the rebellion. So Darth Vader is saying, she's saying that she's just on a diplomatic mission from Alderaan, but he's saying no, you're part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. So he has her on the ship, and he's he's pissed off because there they have the plans to the Death Star. So they go into this meeting room and basically he's saying he's telling his commanders that they need to use the Force, but they don't believe in it. They're practical people. They don't see any evidence of this spiritual spiritual energy called the Force. And of course, when they start to doubt Vader, he gets mad and he chokes one of his commanders. He says, "I find your lack of faith disturbing." Because basically, to them, he's the only remnant of the ancient religion of the Force. What is the Force? The Force is an energy field. It binds everything together in the whole galaxy, but it can also be manipulated. It can be manipulated for good. It can also be manipulated for evil. Obviously, the dark practitioners, which we learn later, are the Sith. They use it for evil, and they use it for um, they use it for their selfish purposes, and and the good guys, the Jedi, use it for good. So there we're introduced to dark, uh, the dark group, the evil people, the villains. And then after that, we're introduced to Luke Skywalker. Like I said, this orphan boy living with his uncle and aunt. His uncle and aunt, they need these droids, and the droids, who are the droids? The droids are C-3PO and R2-D2. One is a protocol droid, C-3PO, and R2-D2 is an R2 unit. Basically, he's like a helper droid too. But within our R2 system is a tape, is a recording, a hologram of Princess Leia that she wants to get to Obi-Wan Kenobi. Years ago, Obi-Wan Kenobi, during the Clone Wars, which was the battle that preceded the rise of the Empire, was basically like their version of World War II. Obi-Wan Kenobi was she helped her he helped uh, Princess Leia's father, and she feels like he can help her in this mission. So she sends the message with R2D2 out to Tatooine. But R2D2 and C3PO, they're captured by Jawas, which are hostile locals on Tatooine, and they are sold in this market to Uncle to Luke Skywalker's uncle and to Luke Skywalker. Now Luke doesn't want to be there. You know what I mean? Uh, he was gonna go down to Tashi Station to pick up some power converters, and he's whining to his uncle and everything. But he goes and they buy C3PO and R2D2. And while he's cleaning them up, he gets the message. He intercepts the message and he sees Princess Leia saying, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're our only hope. You know, years ago you served my father in the Clone Wars." And he's basically in love with her. He'll basically do anything for her. But he doesn't know who Obi-Wan Kenobi is. He asks his uncle, his aunt. They refuse to say who he is because they believe that if Luke had gotten in his mind that um these ideas of adventure, these ideas of to join the rebellion, that he would be lost to the struggle in the same way that his father is. And Uncle Owen doesn't want that for him. But like his aunt says, he has too much of his father in him. And his uncle says, that's what I'm afraid of. And we're led to believe that Luke's father was killed, during the war. We don't really know. We're just led to believe that. So there is a man in town known as Ben Kenobi. So Luke Skywalker believes that Ben Kenobi, he's wondering if Ben Kenobi is Obi-Wan Kenobi. So once again, the droids get captured, and by happenstance, they find Obi-Wan, and Luke. Luke asks him the big question: "Are you Obi-Wan Kenobi? Are you Ben Kenobi?" And he says, "I haven't heard that name in years." And Ben slash Obi-Wan confesses, "Yes, I'm him. I served in the Clone Wars. I was a friend of your father's." And he tells him that a young pupil named Darth Vader betrayed and murdered his father. And he shows him a lightsaber, the special saber, the special weapon of a Jedi Knight, a weapon for a more civilized age, as he puts it. But when he's telling him this story, he pauses for a minute. Luke asks him the question, "You knew my father?" Because Luke was led to believe that his father was a traitor on a spice ship. And of course, he says, "That's what your uncle told you, to try to keep Luke away from adventure." Now, when Obi-Wan pauses, it's for a dramatic pause, obviously, but we don't know that. We don't know really the reason why he paused. We're led to believe that it's for a dramatic pause, but it's actually for a very different reason that we'll get into when we review the second movie. So he asks Luke, "Come with him to Alderaan." And Luke says, "No, I can't. I can't. I mean, I have to help my uncle take care of the farm, here in Tatooine. I can't. It's not that I love the Empire. I hate it, but there's nothing I can do about it now. My uncle needs me here." So Luke has a sense of duty about him that uh, that he must do the right thing. But after after the Empire, looking to get to the droid, kill his family, kill his uncle and aunt. They burn him alive, right? There's nothing for him there. So he finally decides, you know what? I'm coming with you to Alderaan. I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father because he's never met his father, but he admires his father. He he looks up to him even though he's never met him in a really weird way, right? So he decides he's going to Alderaan. So they go to Mos Eisley. That's basically it's this bar, and as Obi-Wan puts it, a wretched a wretched collection of scum and villainy. Basically, the worst of the galaxy, and it's a segregated bar. They won't allow droids in, and somebody comes up to Luke and tries to accost him, and Obi-Wan, chops off the hand of this alien. And it's okay, David. The alien, but in the corner we see we're introduced to two other characters: Han Solo, played by Harrison Ford, and Greedo. And basically they're arguing over a debt. And there's debate about this, who shoots first. In the initial 1977 version, Han Solo shot first because Han Solo is a scoundrel. He's an outlaw. He doesn't care. You know what I mean? He's a mercenary. He'll go. He'll help Obi-Wan and Luke. Sure, he will, but for the right price. you know. And he sells them. He sells his time. Him and his first mate Chewbacca with the Wookiee, and also the Millennium Falcon to take them uh, to Alderaan. Now, the only way he's doing this is that he knows that there's something in it for him monetarily because they tell him the princess that they're looking to save is really, really rich. So he's like, oh, wow, she's really, really rich. I want to do it. He has no great moral conviction. He's not necessarily a good guy. After all, he shot Greedo first, right? And when he has to pay off this debt to Jabba the gangsters that run Tatooine, basically like an alien mafia, right? So he must do this. He must take them there. So they go, and while they're on the ship, Luke Skywalker is learning the ways of the Force. He's practicing with a helmet on, practicing to use his feelings rather than his natural senses. He's practicing to use his feelings to guide him. And of course, Han Solo is mocking it. Han Solo is saying, this is bullshit. Hokey, hokey religions and ancient war weapons is no match for a good saber a good blaster by your side. In other words, he's a man of he's like Darth Vader's generals. He's a man of modern times. He's not about this spiritual bullshit. He thinks it's all bullshit, right? He's basically an atheist within this universe. He doesn't believe in it. Thinks it's all a bunch of hokum, a bunch of nonsense. But they feel something. Both Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker feel something. And what that something is the Death Star is now activated. The Death Star has now uh, blown up Princess Leia's ship. Princess Leia's planet in Alderaan because she would not give up the rebel base on the planet of Yavin. Damien asks, have I ever been to any wrestling show? Yeah, I've been to 3 WrestleManias, Damien. WrestleMania 10, WrestleMania 20, and WrestleMania 29. And several other shows besides that. House shows, Survivor Series. Is basically, back in the day, I used to go to any show that came my way in New York. But back to the review. So Princess Leia's ship is, I mean, ship planet has now blown up Alderaan, and you know now they can't go to Alderaan because it's no longer there. Now their mission becomes to save Princess Leia. So they disguise themselves as stormtroopers so they could get into there, and they break in, and Obi-Wan goes first, and that's when Obi-Wan meets his former pupil, Darth Vader, and uh, Obi-Wan says, "Strike me down, and I shall become more powerful than ever." And Vader strikes him down, and he dies. And Luke sees this, but even though Obi-Wan is dead, Luke must carry on the mission, and he goes to rescue Princess Leia, and she says, "Aren't you a bit short for a stormtrooper?" He goes, "My name is Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you." She goes, "Aren't you a bit short for a stormtrooper?" So, through these series of adventures, including getting caught in a trash compactor. No, I. Uh, they finally make it through, and she is finally rescued. But Luke is scared. Luke is because Obi-Wan, his mentor, has died, but he must continue on. Now, their next mission is to destroy the Death Star. They found the weakness in the Death Star, and they must destroy it. So they got the princess, and Han Solo has gotten his reward. So you think Han Solo is about to leave because again, he doesn't care about anything. He's just a mercenary. He must get back to Tatooine uh, to pay off Jabba the Hutt. But surprisingly, he comes back. So that's a change. That's a redemption of Han Solo. At one time, he was this selfish, just selfish, just gangster, basically outlaw, Western style outlaw. All he cared about was himself and Chewbacca. But now he has friends and he cares about them as well. So he comes back. Luke Skywalker in the X-wing uses the Force and uses the inspiration of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he does blow up the Death Star. And that's the end. And at the end, there is a medal ceremony between in which Han Solo and Luke Skywalker receive medals. Chewbacca does not. And all is good with the world. The Empire is defeated for now. That is the original Star Wars, A New Hope. When they came out, it was a huge success. People loved it. It was a technological marvel. People had never seen anything like it ever before. And it dominated for the entire summer of 1977, which it had a lot of competition. It had Saturday Night Fever had come out, and it was even nominated for an Oscar that year. Did not win, but not won many other Oscars, but it was nominated for Best Pictures. People loved it. It was something different and something refreshing for a dark time. The good guys actually won in a movie. That was incredible for the time. That would not be the end. The next one we'll be getting into is The Empire Strikes Back, which came out in 1980. So that'll be the next one we're getting into, and that's for the next video. Now, that's the end of that. Damien asked me some questions regarding wrestling, and I'm going to answer them. Sorry, I didn't mean to ignore you, Damien. I was just finishing up my review, which was the intent of this video. Did I meet Eddie Guerrero at WrestleMania 20? No, I did not. I saw him wrestle, but I didn't meet him. No, I didn't. uh, did I ever meet any wrestlers? I met a lot of wrestlers, years ago. I live in Brooklyn. There was this place at that time called Funtime USA that a lot of wrestlers, a lot of WWF wrestlers went to. And by the way, if you're watching this for the review, skip past this part where I'm discussing, with my subs, things that are not related to the movie. And I met a bunch of wrestlers, man. Undertaker, China, Triple H, Bret Hart, the Road Warriors. Met Mick Foley, met Bam Bam Bigelow years ago. bunch. Haven't met any modern wrestlers though. Any of the newer ones. Mhm. So you've been to Raws and Smackdowns. That's cool. Um, so that's the end of episode one, episode four, which is the first movie. We'll get into episode five next. Episode five largely is considered the best of the original trilogy, and by many people, including myself, it goes through a lot of twists and turns. It's a surprising twist that uh, will define the rest of the series and will set the tone for what Star Wars is to become. Thank you guys. Thank you, Damien and David. And as far as David, people saying Randy Orton will be the third guy with John Cena and The Rock. I don't know. I think Roman Reigns will. Peace, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.